Hi, this is Anna from Post Me a Book, and welcome to the next installment of the next book. And this time I'm going to talk about Moa Martinson's Women and the Apple Trees. Now, this was a book that is about the strength of women. It's about their womanhood, their sisterhood, their motherhood, their friendships, the strong bonds, their loyalties with each other. It's about poverty, it's about hard times, it's about the struggle of how these women try to rise above these adversities and how they get on with life. But it's also about society around that period, which is 1907, and how society judges them because of the norms, society's morals and its hypocrisy, and this comes out within this book. The book actually starts with a story of, or starts off with a sentence saying, "Today or tonight, Mother bathes." This was about Sophie. Sophie was called Mother or Mamma in Swedish because she was married to a farmer who had the biggest farm in the area. And this is how the book starts. And why is this so important? It's partly because in those days, women didn't bathe as often as Sophie and Fredrika did. And it had started when they were both coming back from the fields, having cut hay all day, and Sophie was heavily pregnant with her 14th child. And she was tired and she was thinking, "I know," and she said out loud to Fredrika, "I just want to go to bed." And Fredrika said, "Let's go and bathe." So from then on, they started bathing once a week in the bathhouse in the farm. And at first, nobody knew about this. But then the farmer, the owner of the bathhouse, he found out. Then nevertheless comes out so that the whole area knows that these two women have started bathing once a week. And it's a scandal because people just couldn't understand, why are two women, one, why are women bathing every week? Two, why are two women bathing together every week? So this gets round the area, goes round to the whole parish, goes round to the whole village, and the scandal and just continues. But at first it's not a problem, or not so much as a problem, despite being a scandal. But then a new priest comes who starts stirring up a bit more, so people and their morals are making it so sinful, and people start saying that these two women are having orgies, and so it becomes a major scandal. But before we get to that point, we need to understand a little bit about Sophie. Sophie was married to a farmer who, as I said, had the biggest farm, so she became Mama Sophie. And the farmer, because of his disability, he never did a day's work, so all the hard work of the farm was mainly done by Sophie. And then as her children started growing up, they helped. So her eldest son helped and became the one who more or less also ran the farm with her. So everybody knew that, if nothing else, Sophie was a very hard worker. Sophie, despite having so many children, despite having the struggles of providing for them more or less herself, she still manages to get on with life. And the other important thing at this point is to realize that Fredrika was her best friend. They were best buddies, and Fredrika was the only person that Sophie would rely on. She wouldn't ask for any help from anyone else, but only from Fredrika. So going back to the part where the whole parish now knows, the whole village now knows, and that the priest has now stirred up all this malice. The outcome of this was they found Sophie in the river. She had drowned herself. So that closes the chapter on Sophie and Fredrika. We don't get to hear anything more about Fredrika after this. The book then moves on to Sally and Ellen. We first meet Sally, who's then 6 years old at this point in the book, which is directly after the chapter that closes on Sophie's death. She is playing, she's just a normal 6-year-old, and she's a normal child in that sense. She enjoys life as a 6-year-old can. She wants to be the best of the other 6-year-olds. She wants them to like her. They don't always. They make fun of her because they are nonetheless quite poor. But Sophie at this point in her life has moved many times, and at the beginning of this chapter, they're about to move again. This time they're going to move to the countryside, So we get to know a little bit about Sally before we then move on to Ellen, who's also living in the same area. Well, not far from Sally, but they never actually meet at this point. Ellen, as compared to Sally, is living in real squalor. The difference between Ellen and Sally is nonetheless, we get to see that she has a mother, a father, and a grandmother who nonetheless do nourish her. Ellen, on the other hand, lives in the slum in the city. She's used to the dump. She's used to dodging drunken men who are trying to grab her. She's used to men who are trying to come in when she's alone at home, trying to take advantage of a 6-year-old. She's used to being sent in dark alleys. What we do know is that when Ellen meets her mother late at night, when the mother finally comes home after working all the work that she's been doing, she does love Ellen, and Ellen does love her mother. It's just that they don't get to see each other so much. So Ellen's situation is a little bit different from Sally's. More poverty, more slums. The thing that with Ellen is that she gets so used to dodging men and hearing women complaining about men who they're always drunk, they're always drinking, they're always doing this, all the negatives about men, that she grows up thinking this, and this actually affects her later in life, and we see how this affects her later in life. So the book continues with these two women, first having married and not having met each other, but by chance they do get to know each other, and by chance in the end they do find out that they are related. They're both related to Mama Sophie. And then we move on to the story of Sally. Sally now is quite grown up. She has 3-4 children, and Ellen had met Sally, who was selling gloves, and Ellen had been quite besotted with Sally when she saw her. Sally is always described as a tall blonde woman, but someone who is she's a very confident, self-possessed woman who will not take anything from anyone. If you're not telling the truth, don't come to her. If you're going to badmouth her, don't come to her, because she'll give you what's what, verbally in any case. And so all the villagers normally didn't have anything good to say about Sally. Even though Sally owed them money, they didn't dare go and ask her for the money, because they just knew that she would just bring them down with words. So they just didn't dare. But the difference between Ellen and Sally was that Sally now was living in poverty. She didn't have a husband. The father of her children was very much away. He came back sometimes, but not very often at all. He had no money, and in the end he was put into prison for, we're never quite sure what for, but she thought that he had smuggled in some brandy or something, and he was finally caught by the police. But to go back, Sally and Ellen meet up because Ellen had decided that she actually wanted to meet Sally, having become completely besotted. So on her way, she was quite pregnant now. She was pregnant with her second child, Ellen. On her way up to Sally, she gets there, she hears shrieking and screaming, and she's wondering, what is that noise? When she gets closer, she finds a woman beating a dog so thoroughly that she is quite shocked. She's hearing children screaming, and then she sees an old man coming out and saying, "You whore, why are you beating my dog? Can't you just leave my dog alone?" And the woman instead flicks the man with a belt and continues beating that dog, and she beats it and she beats it, and the dog is quite savage and trying to bite her, but she's holding it by the scruff of the neck. And even Ellen feels so pity for the dog, and she says, "Please don't beat that dog." But the woman just beats the dog and tells Ellen to go inside. So Ellen goes inside her house and waits for the woman. The woman has tied up the dog, and then she comes in. When Ellen goes in, she finds 2 children, a young boy who's been bitten on the shoulder, and a young girl who's saying, don't worry, it will be all right. And in this scene, she kind of realizes why Sally was beating the dog. It was because it had bitten her son. And this is how this friendship then starts. They become the best of friends, and the lives forward continue like this, with Ellen always coming up to visit Sally. There's a scene where Sally is described giving birth all on her own and what she's thinking through that time. And the war has just started, and she's thinking, just because there's a war, women still give birth. Just because there's a war, things still continue. Nothing gets better just because of war. The ordinary days must go on. And this bit, strangely, when I was reading this bit, I thought about a poem by William Wordsworth that I'd read a long time ago, that has, for some reason, had always struck something in me, and I can't quite remember why. So at the point where their friendship is now very firm, and the whole book is now just about Sally and Ellen, more or less. They go to Stockholm during the war because they need to make money. Sally's kids have now all grown up anyway, apart from her youngest son. But all her kids have now grown up. Her eldest daughter has gone to Stockholm. So they figured, well, we'll go to Stockholm, try and make some money by selling gloves, and perhaps meet her eldest daughter. So they make their way to Stockholm. They rent a place, or they found a place which Edith had rented for them, and there they stay. And then they try to sell gloves. They're having no luck at all. Sally and the old woman get talking, and the old woman says to her, you know what, if you want to sell gloves, go and try and dress like a woman from Dalarna. Dalarna is a place in Sweden. And she says, by doing this, you're going to show that you're very patriotic, and this is what this country needs in a time of war. But she also had help in selling her gloves, because she met a gentleman. Again, Sally is always described as a tall, blonde woman, self-possessed, and she intrigues men. So she manages to intrigue a gentleman who everybody wants to be with. And he actually helps her sell her gloves by saying, he kind of auctions them for her. At the end of it, she's got more than 3,000 krona, which in those days is a lot of money. Then they make their way back. But Sally, their way back home. But Sally now, she's a bit tired of her ordinary life. Her kids are all grown and she doesn't need to be at home. She's looking more for adventure. While Ellen makes it back to her home, it's not quite the same anymore. So the book takes a little bit of a turn. It talks a little bit about Ellen and her life at home, and it talks about how Sally makes it out in the world, but we don't get to hear so much about that either. And the end of the book, I have to say, it was a very nice ending. I mean, I wasn't quite expecting it to end this way, but it's difficult to say because I've missed out this part, so it wouldn't quite make sense. I think you have to read the end. You have to read the book to understand the ending, but it's a very nice ending. Okay, another book that I'd read was this one called The Goddess of Matwara and Other Stories. This one is a book by African writers. I thought this was a new book, but it was a Kane Prize for African Writing 2017. So it's good I discovered it, albeit by chance, because it's about time. But anyway, this is one of the books I'm reading in parallel with, or I was reading in parallel with The Women and the Apple Trees. And the first story is called Who Will Greet You at Home by Leslie Neka Arima. Should I pronounce that wrong? Probably think I should be able to pronounce these right. No. I can pronounce them wrong also, until I hear them perhaps. But anyway, this book, I think it's a good one. It's very surprising because I had no idea what I was expecting. I'm not so good on short stories, but I'm going to read a few more this time around, because I don't normally read reviews, I have to say, or what the book's about, so I didn't have any idea what the book was about or what the story's about. So this one took me completely by surprise. The first book, I have to admit, it completely took me by surprise. And it's about a girl who, it's even difficult to actually summarize, even though it's quite a short story. It's about a girl who's longing to be a mother. And it starts with the girl making a doll, or she has a doll, or what I think is a doll. I'm not sure whether I've misunderstood this. A kind of doll, let's say. She has a kind of doll made out of wool. And this doll has to be blessed. What I don't understand here, and perhaps you don't really have to understand what's going on completely, because I didn't completely understand. But anyway, this doll has to be blessed by a certain woman, and it sort of becomes the girl's baby. But her doll becomes unwoven as she's going along as she's walking along, and this was just by chance. It caught onto something and it unraveled, is what I mean. It unraveled completely, and then she had no baby left because unraveled doll. So then it then goes on to how she then gets another doll, because she'd been told, do not make a doll out of wool because it will unravel. But she went right ahead and did that. And then she has to make another doll, and she worked out how she was going to make another doll. This woman, she worked in a hairdresser's, and she started thinking, aha, I can make a doll out of the women's hair. And this is something you don't do. You don't use other women's hair to make a doll, because that's just not done. It's kind of bad luck. But she then starts thinking, yep, that's what I'm going to make my doll out of. So secretly, she starts collecting the women's hair. This is hair cut by her and other hairdressers, and this shop is owned by the woman who blesses women, who blesses girls or women who are going to make these dolls and have them as babies. And so she starts asking this woman, to bless her. And every time this woman blesses anyone, she wants to get something in return. So she asks them for their happiness. So every time she blesses, she takes a bit more of their happiness. This is just told in the story, but not so much is told why. So going back to how this woman has now decided that this woman is now going to make a doll out of women's hair. So she does this. This story is a bit like Chucky, but not quite. But it's amusing because, as I said, it took me so by surprise. It's a kind of horror story about a doll. Yeah. That comes to life. Anyway, just had to have a little giggle to myself. Yeah, the doll, as she makes it more and more, as she gathers hair and she starts forming her doll, it does come to life. And the story, short as it is how she realizes that this doll is not quite a friendly doll. Every time she's carrying her doll around, it starts sucking on the back of her head, and it really hurts. But she really wants to have this doll, so she doesn't do anything about it. She just lets it suck until it's quite satisfied, and then it lies down, and then she can get on with whatever she's doing. The other women in the hairdressers don't realize that she's got a baby or a doll made out of women's hair. They don't even get to see this doll at all, so they're quite unaware of this doll. But things happen. I won't give the story away. So things happen in the hairdresser's saloon, which just get out of hand, and the story reaches its climax. But not to give anything away, this one, as I said, took me completely by surprise. I was a bit amused, not because it's funny, but just because it took me completely by surprise. But yeah, I did like that because I was not expecting it at all. Bye bye again.